Hello and welcome to the second episode of In the Gutter, our podcast about pop cultures, graphic novels, and everything in between. Today we have with us Villal Pando, who wrote and draw the graphic novel The Pursuer. Villal, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
You created it. The Pursuer is basically your first graphic novel, right?
It is, yeah.
And it's quite an undertaking because it's 145 pages, right?
Yeah, it was it was a big deal. Let's just say that way. Yeah, I didn't. Maybe I don't see it as a mistake, but it was a big achievement. I should have seen a little smaller. I went big or went home, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Was it the goal at the beginning, or it just came that naturally as you were drawing and illustrating?
Well, I knew it was going to be a big book, relatively speaking. Obviously, there are huge books, 400 pages or what so, but I knew it was going to be a big book. I had to make some choices, to stop the bleeding, if you will, like because this could have went on and on for 300 pages if I had to
really?
cut some stuff. But it made my story leaner, and I don't know. It's sort of, I think those when you're forced to make those types of choices, if you're lucky, it ends up being a benefit. It ends up being something more than it could have been if you take too much time for some stuff. And when you have to cut the fat, you end up with something that might be
More efficient.
more efficient. Yeah.
Yeah. Because that's the thing. Like sometimes we get caught up in our own thing, and it just like, and we forget what our original meaning was to a certain extent.
Yeah.
And yeah, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay. No, and that's the thing. It's important to but still, for 145 pages for first book, it was quite an achievement.
Yeah, but it also forced me to trust in my reader. To not over-explain and trust that the reader will figure it out, and that some things don't need to be said too.
That's one of the things I appreciate the most about it, because I found I find a lot of books now, like either they stretch the time by like something that should have been in one page, they take 3-4 pages to tell you.
Yeah.
They don't put a lot of text, but they just basically stretch the story, or they put way too much text and don't rely that much on the drawing to, because technically if it's well done, you understand what's going on, and that's what you're doing. Like you use a lot of it, not so much dialogue in the thing, and you plant clues here and there in the storyline. There's sometimes a drawing on the wall, and so basically you have to pay attention, but you like the stories basically. You just follow the drawings, and then you get the meaning of what's going on. So that's interesting.
Yeah, comics are a visual medium, and you have to let it breathe. You have to, writing is important. That obviously those bubbles are incredibly important, but the drawings have to take a big brunt of the load to explain the story.
That's what I think too. So that's what I found interesting. I also found interesting the mix of styles. Like basically your story is set in the 30s, right?
Yeah.
And you have the main character, the pursuer, and which is basically kind of a socialite, a bit like Batman. And then
the hero archetype of that type of hero. The socialite with a bit of money that decides to help the poor and needy.
Yeah, and then you have another archetype, which is basically Superman, and it's called he's called Noble in the story.
Yeah,
and those two characters were also created in the 30s.
Yeah, there were. I mean, like you mentioned, Superman in 1938, if I'm not mistaken, and Batman in 1939. My story is happens to to be in the 30s, also just slightly earlier. I mean, the story, the on day one in the book, it starts in 1929 during the day of the crash.
The
The
major
yeah, the,
economic crash. Yeah,
exactly, Black Friday. If I is
yeah,
it yeah,
Black Friday. Yeah,
and but then the story jumps forward in time to 1932, and the like the all of the rest of the story happens in that year. But so yeah, I definitely consciously chose to create sort of archetypes that the readers would automatically, or you know, understand, and those
connect.
characters would resonate, deeply with the most readers that are, fans of American comics.
Okay, and then you use also like a gothic noir style or look, color, even a color palette that fits very well that style, and but you also have influence, more modern influence, like a more dark, gritty, like a kind of akin to Frank Miller or even Alan Moore in terms of Alan Moore in
Thematic,
terms of the story and the thematic,
yeah.
but Miller also both in thematic and also in art style and in style in terms of the brooding, the darkness of the world, because it's very dark and almost
Depressing.
depressing. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, well, the early 1930s pre-war were a depressing time. They were a time of struggle. For obviously, I wasn't there, but yeah, these were tough days for most people.
For most
And
people.
I wanted to show that. I think the background of that, it's a fictional story. It happens to be in a city called uh, Grayton City. It's my own book, but I forgot. But yeah, so the city itself is a character. Like the people living in that city are distinct characters that bring in like that gritty feel to it. That time of well, it's the time of depression. So
Yeah. Oh, we certainly feel that, and it also bleeds out in the coloring and everything. Like it's really like you read that and you really get immersed into a very dark world. So it's quite an achievement also for a first book to have that focus and clarity to actually bring us in with the illustration and the coloring, like to get into that world. And then when you get in that, you get really like you feel like you're in a bubble and you just follow the characters along in their world. So it's that for a first book, it's masterful to a certain extent
oh, I
because
appreciate that. That's nice to hear.
yeah.
Did you read it? Did you manage to read it like fairly rapidly, or?
Yeah, no, I read it in one sitting. Like,
Oh well,
yeah,
that's
and
that's high praise.
yeah, and then our employee as well did a review of it a few months ago, and he read it. He also read it in one sitting. So we really enjoyed the book.
I'm
And
glad. I tried to have that the way the story flows. I tried to have these little, even though it's a graphic novel, so it's not. I mean, it's not split into like mini comics that you'll get once a month, but like there's story beats that bring you in that should pique your interest and make you want to keep reading it.
well, basically at its core, it's a mystery, right? So
Yeah.
you want to automatically it teases your brain to try to find out more and more and more and more, and then you also pepper the book with clues,
Yeah.
more or less stated,
Yeah.
but there's clues about what happened and how you can eventually figure out by yourself. Well, like you become the detective just by reading it to a certain extent.
Yeah,
Or
you're right. I tried to pepper the book with little clues, whether it's in the background with a poster or like a newspaper clipping, and you can actually, most of those little clippings, you could actually read the article inside and detect some, if not clues, then at least more background information on the world and some of the characters.
yeah, no. So that's the thing. So it also it keeps your interest because if you want to piece together what happened and why, then it also like contributes to it and it makes for a more immersive experience. I think.
Yeah,
So,
and like any good movie, I guess you could go back and read it again and then spot those things you missed and be like, oh, that's what that meant. You know?
Yeah, you can rediscover parts of the story you didn't even see the first time because that's a complaint I hear often. Oh, it reads too fast, like books, like comic books and graphic novels and stuff. It reads too fast. Is it because you don't not reading them properly?
You gotta also take in the images, the art, the beauty that the artist that put into the visuals.
And there's a lot of hidden details as well. Like in most comics and graphic novels, there's a lot of stuff in the background that you don't even pay attention the first time because you mostly read. Like I think you should read it once for the story,
And
then
once for the art.
one for the art, and a third time to understand how they both work together.
Yeah,
At minimally 3 times.
yeah, I would agree with that. When it works, when you got a good team between an artist and a writer, there's like this beautiful chemistry that happens between the art and the words.
Yeah, yeah, no, and that's the thing, and that's why it's not something you just read. And it's not like a novel. You can read a novel just once if you read it well,
Yeah,
but a graphic novel needs to be read at least a minimum 3 times, if not more, depending on the heaviness of the story. Like for example, if you read Watchmen, you need to read it several times to really understand what's going
agreed.
on.
Yeah, well,
But
that's
that's a specific,
that's the
yeah.
quintessential work.
No, but it's an example. But
Yeah.
it's like take the biggest example of all. But I think it's the same for pretty much most books. Even like silly stuff like we used to read as a kid, like Asterix or whatever. There was so many like wordplay and even visual gags that you miss the first time you
Yeah,
read them.
absolutely.
So that's the thing. So it's not something you just read once and you flip through and then you're done. It's you need to come back to the well a few times to really grasp what the people did because that's the thing. That's the part I find the most depressing. Sometimes people, oh yeah, I just read it. I read it in 2 minutes. And this,
Well, I mean, it is entertainment,
yeah,
and it's a fairly quick form of entertainment, but highly rereadable. I mean, that's one thing. I have plenty of comics at home and graphic novels, and every year I go through them again. I restart. I reread everything I have. Any good work at least will be reread by me. Maybe 7 to 100 times.
I don't know. I
Yeah.
have plenty of books like I reread like at least 100 times because even sometimes even after 100 times, you still see stuff. The only movies I can think of that is similar is like the Airplane and Top Secret. Like there's so many gags that even like sometimes 3, 4, 5 layers. I think Top Secret I've seen it like probably near 100 times and I still find stuff.
I only saw Top Secret maybe twice, but
Oh,
Airplane is. I would agree. Airplane is insane in the amount of. It's like a gag a second.
yeah.
It's amazing that type of comedy is a rare.
Yeah, and it's really hard to do. So that's the thing because there's so much,
Yeah.
and it's a bit the same thing with the graphic novels to a certain extent. Like it's not the same medium, it's not the same rhythm either, but like a lot of work is put into the backgrounds and
Yeah,
all,
and it's a visual medium. I don't want to toot my own horn. I mean, I'm not even talking about my own work, but I mean, they're little pieces of art. They
yeah,
they might not be put into a museum, but they are pieces of art. And just like watching a painting, yeah, you can look at a painting fairly quickly if it doesn't catch your interest. But a decent the great masters, it's worthwhile to sit and take it all in for a few minutes.
yeah, exactly. So no, it's interesting for that. And what brought you to make a graphic novel?
Well, that's a big question. Well, as a kid, fairly young kid, growing up in Montreal, I had my parents had bought us comic, not like American comics, but Franco-Belge, Franco-Belgian comics like Asterix and Tintin. And so all these European comics were at home and at our disposition, and we were my mother was just happy that we were readers, whatever the form. So we had comics at home, these types of comics. But what really changed, I think, was grandmother had at some point had when we did go visit her, we were three little boys and we had to be entertained in some way. So she I don't know why she picked those, but she grabbed some American comics and brought them to her place. And when we finally visited, I stumbled upon these comics, and these two comics happened to be um, The Dark Knight Returns. No, sorry, I'm mistaken. It was Year One.
Batman Year One. Okay.
Batman Year One, but only half of it. Only
Okay.
like because it was split into two. It was a French
French
edition,
edition.
so it
Okay.
was split into two. So I had the first part of Year One, and the other one was the first part of Dematteis's Craven's Last Hunt.
Oh wow. Okay.
And so these were both made, I think, in 1987, if
Yeah.
I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
I was a slightly, it must have been 91 or something when she had those at her place, and I stumbled upon these two books, and for the time at least, these were a big deal to me. I mean, these were something else. I felt like these were not meant for me to read, and it opened a little magic door into like this weird and great and dark comic universe that I didn't know about. So that was a big deal. That was a big deal, and that's when I really fell in love with, I think, the comic medium, because
Okay.
I did like comics. I did like Tintin. I liked Asterix. I liked Spirou, but those two comics really did something to me, and I fell in love. I always loved to draw, but drawing is not the same thing as it's not the exact equivalent of making comics. It's
No.
just so these two books really gave me the that little made my heart flutter for for American comics.
Give you the fire for it
Yeah, well, not quite. I mean, yes, I mean, it gave me the love,
of it.
but I don't think these were not the comics that made me want to make comics. They made me love them. I think, and then I grew up a little in my teenage years. Girls were a little more important to me than comics. So, and it was the '90s, and with Image and Spawn and all that stuff, and I was. It didn't resonate as much to me that time. All the hatchet, that technique,
Hatching.
it just wasn't resonating with me. So I kind of not fell out of love, but just kind of did something and like hanging out with my friends and not really reading comics, and then
Interest waned in a way.
yeah, slightly. I mean, I had other stuff going on, but then in my early adulthood, when I was, I think, 19, then I fell in love with comics. I mean, I discovered Mignola, Hellboy. There was Preacher. What was there? Oh yeah, I fell in love with Tim Sale's
Tim
art.
Sale. Yeah.
And it felt like Tim Sale's art and Darwin Cook's art, and it felt I don't want to diminish their style, because Tim Sale they're both dead now, I think, if I'm
Yeah.
not mistaken.
Yeah.
They both but I'm not diminishing their style, but because I was ignorant, I felt like these were more approachable styles, like, oh well, this is something I might be able to do, and I can't. I'm not saying I still can't, but I mean, it gave me like the feeling that I don't need to be Jim Lee.
Yeah.
I don't need to draw like Jim Lee. I could do something along those lines, and I'm not. Just so people know, I'm not comparing myself to any of those artists. Those are amazing masters, but it just made me feel like I could find my own little style, and it would be valuable. It would be acceptable as a piece of work.
That's a piece of work.
So these books were what really brought me back into comics, and convinced and kind of convinced me that I could, like these things are so great, and I want to tell stories too. So,
Yeah.
and I think I might be able to do it. So that's what gave me the
The impetus.
yeah.
Because the Darwin Cook, especially with Tim Sale as well, like it looks simple, but it's far from it.
Exactly. And
It looks it's not the same style as Jim Lee or Tom McFarlane, all these guys from the '90s, but it's very they really know how to tell a story, how to set their
absolutely.
panels, and even though the style might look simple or not too complex, it's actually it's the behind the scene that is in a
Exactly.
sense. Yeah.
For Tim Sale, I believe like his strong suit was composition. I
Yeah.
mean, the way he placed objects and people in panels and the different sizes and working together. That's where the magic happens. And with Mignola, well, Mignola, everybody knows he's a freaking he's
Oh, it's a
a
genius.
master.
Yeah.
But it does feel like when you don't know, you feel like it's approachable. You feel like I might be able to do. I mean, it's a lot of black ink. You know, I don't need to hatch anything. I just need to fill in the spaces with black, and that's gonna work, right? And you're
Yeah.
wrong. It's not, but that's what you feel at first when you don't know anything. You feel like you could maybe do that.
Yeah, no, it's true. Like it feels like there's a big splotch of black and a few splotches of colors, and there you go. And it gives you an impression of what it's supposed to be, but it's much more
Yeah, I
masterful
feel
than
like
that.
he's like Mignola might be like an impressionist in some ways, you know. And his strong suit, I feel, is especially in Hellboy, is capacity to create atmosphere, but also to capture time in a way.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
little panels there that are focusing on some object you've never seen anywhere else in the book, but then you know it's there in that place in that time, and it stops you. It stops the time and makes it spooky. I don't know. It's quite a talent that I can't. There's no way I could approach that type of
No,
storytelling. At least,
no,
hopefully one day, but I'm being realistic. It's probably not gonna happen.
no, because there's a mastery there that you don't necessarily realize when you just read it like casually, but when you actually take the time to inspect it, it's really impressive. And that's the thing, is that's why it's not just for kids or just like a throwaway entertainment. It's really
It's art.
an art
Yeah,
form in
yeah.
itself. Yeah, I kind of agree. I kind of
I
agree.
mean, we're speaking to we're preaching to the choir,
Well,
but
no, I know, but still, like it's eventually maybe the message will get
I
somewhere.
hope so. I do, and yeah, absolutely.
um, can you share some of the tools or software you use for your work?
Yeah, I can. I mean, I sadly I'm not the most technologically advanced person. I'm always like 15 years too late. So yeah, I have. Honestly, I don't think I'll bring anything new to the table. For the Pursuer, everything was firstly, sketched by hand, but then was inked with the computer. But since my art is fairly angular, I could actually ink with straight lines, lines that did not deviate from their thickness.
Yeah.
So I chose that aesthetic to be able to produce more quickly. I haven't mentioned it, but I'm a fairly slow artist, very, very slow in my drawing capacities. I can. I'm pretty proud of my work, but I am slow, and that's a huge disadvantage as an artist. You need to be able to produce fast. So for the Pursuer, knowing that it was going to be a big book, I tried to find a type of style that I could, produce uh, fairly, and it wasn't really the case, but fairly rapidly, and a style that would be, you know, e- easily might not be the case, but easily reproducible. Like, because I see myself more as an illustrator. I see myself as a storyteller, but I think my true talent as a visual artist lies in illustration. And while being a comic book artist, I do love it and aspire to become a great comic book artist. I feel like I'm a better illustrator than a comic artist. So it's easy for me to make a great illustration, but to take that same character and see him in different angles and different situations and different and having different v- uh, physical expressions is a bit more of a challenge. So choosing that angular style helped me to be able to, to have a consistent product
Throughout.
throughout the book. If you, I don't, if you pick up my book, if you start at page 1 and you end at page 45, you won't see a huge gap, of a change in the evolution of the drawing. I tried to maintain that same style throughout the book, even though the first page was done, thousands of hours
Before.
before. I tried to maintain that style.
Okay. Oh, very interesting. And do you have any new project in the works?
I do. I'm working on a couple of things. I'm at the writing stage, so I'm not drawing. The first one is a tale that happens in the context of Norse mythology. And the simplest way to explain it is imagine a character like a type of Forrest Gump character. Not that it's there's no humor in the story, but meaning that you take this this character that's put into all kinds of different big historical moments, at least in terms of the Norse mythology, and then he's you see that moment through his eyes. And
He's kind of a naive character in the sense that he doesn't understand that world, and he just jumped. He's basically put in it.
yeah, well, you take a normal human being and you stick him in Asgard with the gods, and you'll have some pretty. I assure. Well, I'm pretty sure that character will be out of his depth and amazed at what he sees.
Yeah, no, that's true.
That's one project I'm writing. Hopefully, I'll find an artist, a collaborator to do the project with, because I don't see my own personal style as super fitting with that type of work. It's very
Okay.
distinct. It's very different, as you can tell. Well, you've read
Yeah.
the Pursuer. It's very different from the Pursuer. So
Absolutely.
I feel like that I have a specific visual style I'd want to have for that book, and it's not my strong suit. So I'd like to have ideally a partner to do that with, and knock on wood, I'll find someone. And the other one is that uh, I I'm slowly writing the script for. It's very personal. It's a very personal project. It's about my relationship with my father.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's totally different.
Yeah, this might take years to do, because I had a difficult relationship with my father. He was a clown. He was an artist, and he was also a very difficult person to be with. I loved him very much, but it was quite a ride at home, let's just say. And he fought cancer for a long time, and it was a tough battle, and it brought all kinds of emotions in our lives. And yeah, I know it's might not be like this is more for me.
Yeah.
This is more of a very personal project, and it'll take the time it takes. Sometimes I'm in the mood for it, and sometimes I'm not.
Yeah, but there's stories like that we need to get out of our system at some point.
Yeah,
Anyway.
that it's part of grieving in some way.
Yeah.
It's a process.
Yeah, yeah, no, totally understand. Um, we were talking before the podcast about the state of the industry and all that stuff, and you mentioned like we know that like, we're talking about that manga going up, and then the slow, torturous decline of the American comic
Yeah.
books. What's your state? What's your vision of it?
Well, I don't want to. I'll be careful with my words, because I know nothing. I mean, you know a lot more about. I see it from my perspective as a small independent creator.
Yeah.
But
Well, that's what I want. I want to see what's your point of view as somebody from not necessarily the outside, but with a different perspective than me.
well, I can certainly see the appeal for manga. I mean, there's great work. As a kid, I was a huge fan of. I'm dating myself because it's, but I think it's still in demand. But
It's
I
huge
was
demand,
I was a big fan of Dragon Ball, and to this day I still have my Dragon Balls, and occasionally I pull them out and read them. They're a great piece of work, at least some of those volumes, and Akira Toriyama's art is fantastic. His capacity for action scenes is amazing.
Yeah.
It's out of this world, at least from what I know.
Everything with motion, he really
He
masters. Yeah,
excels, yeah.
yeah,
So I can definitely see the appeal for that, and like there are some cultural shifts in society and more interest for Japanese culture. So I totally get that. I would hopefully it wouldn't. It's not on the like that popularity is not on the back of like the local or North American comics, but it might be the case. I'm not sure. The decline is a little bit might be a little bit understandable. I think a big. I'm not gonna necessarily talk about the what's directly happening inside the big two, but I think it might be silly, but how do you create a new generation of readers? Is you have to get access to them, and at least in my time, which I'm again dating myself, I'm not that young anymore. I'm almost 40, but those you'd go into pharmacy, and then there would be those little comics there, and you could just pick one up, and the type that the type of storytelling inside them, those episodic formats would help young readers just grab on to the character and start falling in love with those characters. The new comics, although there are some great American comics, they might not be super easy to get into because stories might be a little more complex. You might need a more background. It's not that it's not episodic, but there's those stories go on into 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 volume runs. So
yeah.
the idea of just picking one up uh, and just falling and just understanding or getting into it might not be that easy.
It's not easy. The price doesn't help either. Like the price has gone up like significantly the last decade.
Yeah,
And young kid, it's not everybody who has $50 an allowance per week to buy comics,
absolutely.
and it's some of them are really expensive. There's also, I think, the problem that you mentioned, the ghettoization of it, in the
Yeah,
sense that it's only a bit. I understand why they did it from a business standpoint because it
absolutely.
was all the returns, the damages, and all that stuff, and they figured, okay, well, we'll sell it to them. They can't return them, but at least it's like it's in one place and it worked for a while, but it's the way with technology changing and everything. I think now we need to rethink the entire distribution system of that, because now it's too niche. It became an anomaly in a sense.
Yeah, and although I love that feeling of community that you get in a comic store, it's great. I feel at home there. For it might be it's for the person who just wants to get into it. It might be intimidating. It's not easy. It's not the easiest way to because they're not everywhere. I mean, there's not a
No,
lot of comic stores in Montreal, but
no.
just by default. And for kids, well, kids, I don't know, they got it kind of, I feel like obviously I'm not a businessman, and I don't run a I don't run a comic company, but if I had surpluses of volumes of books, I would go into schools.
Schools.
And if you're gonna just lose those books, or they're just gonna stand there, go into schools and donate a few of those books,
Yeah.
put them in the classes, and it'll take time because kids need to grow up, but you'll create a new generation eventually. After 10 years, these kids that fell in love with those characters will want to know more about them, and will have a bit of money to spend at that time.
Yeah. Oh, that's always part of the problem. Like it's one thing we do. We do when we have leftover books, we put them in a package. We sell 10 books for $1 each. $10, 10 books for $10, right?
Yeah.
Try to make it affordable because technically, normally each book would be $5. So it's like it's $50 just for 10 books. It's insane, like in terms of the pricing. But there's also the fact I find also my main beef with the big companies is the lack of marketing.
Yeah.
Like often we have to order books 2 months in advance, and then the day the book comes up, people are calling, "Oh, can I get that book?" Because no, we had to order it 2 weeks in advance, and it's already sold out.
Yeah,
And
and it's impulse buy at some point too. You know, it's a because these are costly things, and so you know you get the itch. You want your comic. You ask for it, and it's not there. Then you know life happens, and you go to a restaurant, and you know, well things are tight now, so I won't be.
I
I
won't be,
won't be.
but the problem is, like for example, they send us a catalog. There's this little like synopsis, and you have to make a guess. Is that gonna work or not? I'm ordering how many?
Yeah,
And then they have an embargo for the reviews like a week before the book gets released, but it's already too late to order it.
absolutely.
And then so the people hear about the book for the first time like a week before it comes out, and then they want it when it comes out, and then you're like, well, I didn't know it would work, so I ordered like just 5 or just 10 for the store or whatever, and I don't have any copies left, and everybody wants a copy of the book, and so you're stuck, not even able to fulfill what people want. So it's kind of a weird way of proceeding.
Yeah, and you have the onus of trying to figure out what your clientele wants, and it's sometimes it works and sometimes it
Sometimes it
doesn't.
doesn't.
Yeah.
Exactly. Sometimes you take a guess, and then oftentimes you take a guess and it doesn't work. Sometimes you take a guess and it does work, and you're happy. You maybe sometimes you're the only store that has all enough books for the other people because the others didn't get on the bandwagon, didn't jump on the bandwagon. But I find it's hard, and also, but I understand too, because for the independents, it's difficult because there's not like we're talking in the French podcast about how you have to be part of the shows, part to promote your own book, because even though you have an editor, they don't have any resource to promote the book.
Yeah.
But the big two have resource, they have money, and their marketing, I find, is deficient as well because barely hear about anything except the catalog. And so if you're not already in the ecosystem, you're totally left out.
Yeah. And they have diversified, and I mean they went all in on the movie front and TV front, and I'm not sure. I mean, I'm sure the entities are not fully connected, but I was surprised 10 years ago when you know when the Marvel craze was the movie Marvel Universe craze was really picking up steam. I was surprised that I didn't see the. I'll be honest, I did not see the numbers, but I'm fairly sure that all the money that was made in the cinemas did not quite translate into selling books.
I remember I saw the Winter Soldier movie, and I thought it was a pretty good movie. But I also read the Winter Soldier story
Yeah.
by Brubaker, and I thought the original story was better. And I wanted to give it as a gift for Christmas to one of my brothers,
Okay.
and it was nowhere. You could not. I didn't even have a book shop at the time, and I went to every store. I even went to Laval. Nobody had copies. It was out of print, and the
Oh.
movie was in theaters. And I'm like, what are you
Yeah,
doing?
that's a huge fail. That's a huge failure as a business.
Yeah, I could
For
not
sure.
give it. I could not give him the gift because I could not find it anywhere, and the movie was out. You have this huge marketing machine that spends millions of dollars to spread the story across the world, and oh yeah, well we're not going to print another book because
I guess they didn't care about that I guess they saw it as chump change for the movie box office, so they didn't care. But
uh,
in the long run, you know, your true like the true essence of those characters comes from that form. And you know, when the movie universe starts to fail, which we're kind of seeing happen now,
yeah,
we are not kind of. I feel like it is failing.
yeah.
Um, all you'll have left are the books, and if the books aren't you know, if you didn't manage to bring in a you know a new generation, then it it will disappear slowly.
Even the current people who might have an interest. For example, I'm a big She-Hulk fan. I hated the TV show. I thought it was really badly done.
I couldn't finish it.
Yeah, it was awful. It was awful. And I like the John Byrne run of She-Hulk. It's really funny. It's really innovative, original. You cannot give it to people. Oh, I saw the TV show. This is crap.
Yeah, it kind of spoiled the.
They spoiled the actual good books as well, and I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah, they I feel like they should have that, that Nintendo culture. That Nintendo has this these great properties like Mario, and they take care of them
Yeah.
so much, maybe too much, but
Yeah.
but they really take care of those characters and their legacy. And yeah, if you're not careful, you might just kill off the appreciation for those fantastic characters.
Well, I think they're killing the golden goose in a sense because let's face it, the first 10 years they made billions with these movies. Now they're actually losing
They're
money.
losing money.
And not only they're losing money, but it's already like the industry that actually gave them birth was always been struggling for the last 2 decades.
Yeah.
And now they're actually also killing it. So I'm like, wow, at some point, somebody needs to wake up. I don't know what it's going to take.
But it is a tough medium. Like the big two, they have characters that are like Batman is what, he's 80 years old now, something like that, and Spider-Man is 60
something,
50 something.
65, yeah.
I'm not a math guy, but but yeah, it's like a double-edged sword because these characters have so much history they have great stuff, they great storylines and they're great characters, but can it go on forever? It's a good question. Can you actually have a bi-monthly run of a character? And I could really see like I always loved Elseworlds, okay? Because it was a pick me up kind of thing. You read it. It was his own contained story.
Yeah.
And that was it. And you could put it back and you didn't need to know 50 years of history. Although I do know a lot of the history, it's refreshing to pick up a book and it's self-contained.
Yeah.
And it's easier for, first-time readers or at least people that would want to get into it. And I'm not saying it should be just all Elseworlds, but it might just like... It might be a good thing to see, like to look at the European way of doing comics and maybe trying to maybe not 100% emulate what they're doing, but maybe it should be an aspect of the business model.
Yeah, no, I agree. But it's kind of what Image and Boom and a few others are trying to do outside of their franchise. Like they purchase the rights, like Buffy or Transformers. Like they do a lot of one shots, or they do like mini series or something like 4 or 5 books, and it's complete. And they try to explore other realm than just superheroes. They explore the mystery, the murders. They explore the science fiction and fantasy and all that stuff. And that's more an European approach, I find.
Yeah.
But I think what they lack is the resources or the will to have a proper marketing as well. It's the same issue. Like they promote it to the shop owners, but they don't promote it to the people. And then you order the book, and then you have the job to explain to everybody what it is and why they should buy it, which is part of the job. There's no problem there. But it's not 1 or 2 people are going to do the job of actually putting an effort to put it in front of people like they do in the movies, right? When the movie's coming out, you only hear about that for like 3 weeks, 4 weeks. I understand they don't have the same means like financially, but at least use all you can, like the websites that talk about comics and everything to actually push your product and not wait just a week before it comes out to tell us about it.
Yeah.
I think that's the main problem with that industry. Is like,
and these have to be, I guess, long-term solutions, not quick, like quick stunts. It has to be like they have to have a long-term vision and not expect that all that work will pay off instantly.
Yeah,
they don't. You can't give up because after like your first try at something, it doesn't pay off like you'd want. This is if you need to create a long-term audience, you got to put in the work for years, you know.
Exactly.
And it's become, you know, I love comic cons and I love comics, but it is expensive. These are, you know, these are for expensive products. Obviously they're not Teslas, but if you really get into it and you want, you know, you need to, it's, you know, it's a fairly like any passions, it's a, you know, it's a fair amount of cash. But if you can, you try to make it more accessible. I mean, I don't know. I've never been to you in the States to a to a comic convention like in San Diego. I've never been to New York either for the Comic Con. But I think, from what I understand, these are fairly expensive
Oh yeah.
events,
Yeah.
and obviously you can't go back to what was like what they were in the 80s or early 90s. You know, times have changed, but maybe there's a way to make these less, you know, maybe go back to sometimes go back to a slightly pure event where they're not, you know, they're actually, there's a lot more comics than, let's say, I don't know, swords or cosplaying
Movie
stuff. Or, I
stars.
mean, those things are great. It's a quite the experience, but I would love to have just a smaller venue with, you know, that will interest less people, but you know, it's more, it's a purer form of it's if you're there, it's for, you know, your love of comics and or showing the new generation what comics are all about, so they don't, you know, when they do actually show up, their interest is not drawn to Pokemons. And I'm not dissing
No,
Pokemon at
no,
all,
no.
but you know, if you bring a kid into a Comic Con, he'll remember the stuff he already knows, might not be take too much interest into the, you know, the comics themselves.
Yeah.
So it's a tough competition. I mean,
But that's the irony because it started with comics, and it's why it's called Comic Cons, and now they became a side note of their own show.
yeah, and the Comic Con itself, I see it now as what it is, and it's a really cool place. I'm not trying. I don't want to be the old man that's like, hey, it should be like this or that. But a small venue with, you know, that's, you're not expecting that you'll make the kind of money that a Comic Con will make, but it is all about the comics, and you reach out to schools for a great day of you know, classes, hundreds if not thousands of kids throughout the day that stroll in and discover that type of art.
Yeah.
And some of them, not all of them obviously, but some of them will get that, you know, that fall in love with that medium.
Yeah.
Some of them will.
Oh,
And
for sure, guaranteed, guaranteed. Yeah, because it worked before, it will work again for us. But it's just you need to be on the spotlight to a certain extent.
yeah.
Yeah. Villal, that was a very interesting conversation. I thank you very much for your time. And this was In the Gutter, episode 2.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.